Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of the House of Grey. Seems like Monson isn't the only one with problems at Collin. What prompted the men in black to show up? What security threat could force Collin into a lockdown? Who would attack the diamond and trash the Hornveer weight room? Well, we might know the answer to that last one. As Monson tries to sort out everything that's happened to him recently, the last thing he needs is more unanswered questions. If you have burning questions about the book, let us know in the forum or blog over at houseofgreybook.com. Let's see if Monson can find some of his answers in episode 20.
Who on earth would attack the diamond? Asked Molly through a dropped jaw. They were all back in Monson's apartment. Casey, Artorius, and Monson sat opposite of Molly and Brian, who were listening politely as Casey relayed the events of that morning. Neither Molly nor Brian appeared shocked upon hearing the news of the MIBs, but astonishment dashed across both their faces the moment Artorius mentioned Damien. I know Damien Peterson. We met when Monson won his scholarship. He is a very sweet boy. I can't imagine anyone wanting to hurt him.
You think that's bad? Chuck this out.
Casey showed Molly his phone. What is that? Casey pulled back his arm and looked at the Blackberry Storm screen.
It's the Hornveer's private weight room. It's where Damien works out.
But how did
it become like the demolition phase of Extreme Makeover Home Edition?
Molly nodded.
No one knows, but I'm guessing it was a group of people with really big sledgehammers. No one person could have done that much damage alone. Just look at the gouges in the walls.
Monson's ears shut off. No one person could have done that much damage. That was probably correct. But one mentally broken person with two personalities and a bone to pick probably could, and probably did. The weight room. He had been there. Now he was sure of it. But then where was the hole in his chest from the gleaming knife? He had not removed himself from the premises, at least, not that he could remember. How much of that dream had been real? How much was a nightmare? And how could he have caused so much destruction? He did not understand.
I wonder when all this happened.
Casey put down his phone and then threw his arms up around his head, interlocking his fingers. He settled back in his chair.
Gray and I were in that area just yesterday. We ended up around there after an attempt to avoid some parasitic individuals. I wasn't that far away.
He sat up, removing his hands, and again took up the phone.
I don't know how all of that could have happened without anyone hearing anything.
You were in the area? What does that mean? Molly sat up a little straighter and sounded a bit on the indignant side. And why is Damien using your weight room? Monson scowled at her. Probably because he can actually use it, and I didn't even know it existed until I met with until I saw those pictures this morning. He choked back the words, glancing around at the others. Luckily, they did not seem to notice. Monson did his best to remain calm. He had almost made a critical slip. He needed time to think, to mull this over, and he needed to keep his mouth shut until then. He laughed ironically. So much for being honest. To his immense relief, Casey cut in right after him.
Molly, before we get any further into this subject, we have a few questions for you.
Molly took an unconcerned sip of tea. What do you mean, Cassius?
Oh, I think you know exactly what I mean. The suits we saw earlier at the GM? Neither you or Brian seemed surprised.
And what about them? She put down her teacup and saucer. I told you someone important may be coming in the next few days.
True, but you didn't tell us who.
Molly gave Casey a playful, albeit forced, wink. And spoil the surprise? Not on your life.
You're really not going to tell us?
I would like to, Cassius. I just don't think it's a good idea to let you know right now. I don't want to cause an uproar if I don't have to.
An uproar? Who on earth could possibly visit this school to cause such an uproar? I mean, look who we have here already. The Diamond, Taurus Green, members of both NSYNC 2 and Backstreet Boys Reborn all go to school here, and I'm just getting started. Basically, this place has more teen stars than the Hollywood Walk of Fame. So, who could possibly be coming that would cause such a ruckus?
I don't know if your analogy really drives home your point, Case,
interrupted Artorius thoughtfully.
Maybe you should have said something like, more stars than the Milky Way.
And it's than, not then. Monson, despite his current torrent of heavy emotion, chuckled. At least he could always count on his habit of laughing at inappropriate times. Casey's words came venomous.
Arthur, you are so not helping.
How many times do I have to ask you?
The sultry timbre of Michael Bublé blared from Molly's phone and swallowed the remaining catchphrase. She threw the phone up to her ear. This is Molly? Yes. No. She paused as chattering came out of the speaker of her phone. Her visage sharply changed. You've got to be kidding me. Still? You must be joking. Molly's face soured as she started to stand. Scanning the upturned faces of the curious boys, she said into the phone, Hold on. I'll be there momentarily. Monson started to protest. He did not want Molly to leave quite yet. She stopped him even before he could voice his objection. I will be back soon, Monson, honey. She gestured to the phone. But I have to take care of this before it starts to get out of hand. With that, she left. Monson slumped further into his chair.
You must really want to talk about this Damien thing, huh, Grey? You know, that's sort of surprising, considering everything you just found out.
Monson centered his attention on Casey. Yeah, maybe I just want to get my mind off of it. Artorius let out a weary breath.
I don't blame you, man. The Diamond is thrashed, the info about Barty Bridge is bursting at the seams. You're hooking up with Harrison, and campus has more suits than Capitol Hill.
Artorius gave Casey an unexpected, outrageously cocky grin.
See, that's how you make a comparison.
You aren't serious. My analogy was way better than yours.
Your analogy was way better than mine.
Well, I'm glad you agree with me.
Shut up, Casey.
I'm so going to hit you, Arthur.
Monson laughed again, and noted that it was good to know that he was not the only one that dealt with stressful situations with humor. He settled in to watch the show of playful banter. The rolling credits of their third, 3-hour movie marked the end of a truly epic experience. Lord of the Rings was honestly unbelievable. Monson scanned the quickly darkening room. Casey and Artorius were both fast asleep. For a short, devious span, Monson considered dumping ice-cold water on the both of them. He would probably receive a good beating for it, but really, it might be worth it. He was reluctant to wake them, however. It was nice to have some alone time and enjoy the peace and quiet. He needed time with his thoughts, and now was as good a time as any. He meandered around the apartment, engaging in various pursuits. He tried reading, playing with Artorius' PSP, surfing the internet, and even considered going back through the crazy poetry he encountered on his first day at Collin. In actuality, he came so close to this last option, he pulled the still dusty tin from its hiding place. At the last moment, however, he stopped himself. More weird gibberish probably was not going to help. He sneered, extremely irritated. Nothing was working. He simply could not make any sense of his current predicament. What was worse, he did not even know what question to ask, let alone where to find the answer. He tossed the tin in frustration. It landed on the far side of his bed and clinked as it struck something solid. His irritation succumbed as curiosity took over. Monson walked over to the other side of the bed and found...
My boken?
He instinctively glanced around the room as if searching for someone. He could not remember leaving the mock weapon there, but then again, he stopped himself mid-thought. That line of reasoning was rapidly becoming something of a habit for him. He was just going to settle on that he had left it on his bed and forgotten about it. No weird connotations, no spooky dreams or crazy voices. He had just forgot. That was his story, and he was sticking to it. He removed the sword from his bed, pulling the cord of the purple drawstring bag as he did.
He slid the boken out of the pouch and took up the handle, as a very reminiscent feeling came with the touch of cool, hard wood. The feeling of nostalgia in place, he gripped the boken in a double-fisted hold and took a couple of practice swings.
He thought of Artorius' instruction.
Footwork, Grey. Watch your footwork.
Monson glided with ease as he parried a blow from an invisible, imaginary attacker. The faceless swordsman countered with a downward two-handed cleave. Monson dodged and reposed, sweeping his blade at the neck of his attacker. Unfortunately, he had fallen a bit too heavily into his fantasy world and was again unaware of his surroundings. A sudden impact and a loud crack crushed that fantasy world and sent his sword from his hand. Slightly distraught, he examined the left post at the foot of his four-poster bed and found a large indentation. He glared at the mar in the wood. Yeah, he had just lost to a bedpost. Well played. You win this round. He laughed at his own joke and found that his heart was feeling much lighter and his mind a great deal clearer. He made the choice in an instant. It was time to go and practice some fencing. "15 minutes later, Monson was in the figurative shadow of the barracks' massive backyard. He had rarely come to this place since it served as one of the unspoken, informal gathering spots for students. Not to mention, there was usually some sort of athletic activity going on here. There were other locations for such pickup games, the various sports fields and such, but most of the students lived in the barracks, so it made sense that they would want to remain a bit closer to home. Ultimate frisbee, small soccer games, even cheerleading practice popped up at almost any given time during the weekends and frequently in the evenings during the weekdays. Actually, Monson could see most of the grounds from his bedroom window. Sometimes he would watch the games from his room, observing the flow of chattering students. While the current level of his harassment paled in comparison to a short time ago, he still abstained from venturing into this avenue of school culture. Too many people, too large of crowds. The whole concept just made him uncomfortable. No problem with that today, however, as the murkiness of the impending evening and the virtual lockdown issued by Mr. Gatt seemed to have kept students indoors. He put down his things at one of the covered picnic tables near the barracks edge, wanting to keep his stuff dry, as it looked like it was probably going to rain. He opened up his backpack and pulled out one of his many leather-bound volumes. Flipping through the book, he found what he was searching for. Notes, and lots of them, sat on the recent pages of his journal. These writings detailed concepts and distinctions from both Casey and Artorius' vast knowledge of different fighting styles and forms. Regretfully, the notes were very disjointed.
He did not have the opportunity to jot his thoughts and instruction down while having more practical things to worry about, like keeping his head on his shoulders. Mercy on the battlefield was not something Casey and Artorius were known for.
After his lessons in gym, he had laid down as much as he could remember, but found the concepts much harder to verbalize when he was unaccompanied. Further still, much of what he wrote was simple observation, especially in regards to Casey's fighting style. Casey had taken to doing various kata or forms practice in gym, giving Monson an excellent opportunity to observe some of the finer points of his form-based style. Monson was continually amazed at how fascinating Casey's style was.
However, Monson came to realize in the short time of studying that he really liked fencing, a lot more than that hand-to-hand stuff.
Fencing was lots of fun, even if he did suck at it. And really, he did suck. It hurt his pride to admit it, but he had yet to land a single blow on either Casey or Artorius, even when they were not using some of their obvious advantages.
Those advantages ranged from Casey sticking only to weapon use to Artorius using his heavy subarito instead of his boken.
Monson did not mind, though. He was not so competitive that he dwelt on things like that. He just thought it was fun and familiar, and so he practiced, even if he was a bit of an embarrassment. Even with his inadequacies, Monson progressed, doing his best to keep up with the lessons. Most of their time in gym was spent doing the basics over and over again. Their form practice consisted of this never-ending chore. When he was on his own, however, he liked to work on more advanced forms. The move he was currently working on was one that he had merely watched Artorius do. The 4 points was an attacking maneuver that struck 4 of the 9 strike zones on the body, almost simultaneously. These points, located on the head, shoulders, arms, chest, stomach, and legs, gave the attacker a central point to hit. Monson's version of the 4 points aimed for the shoulders, chest, and head, those being, in his opinion, the most obvious strike points to use for this particular move. His movement consisted of 2 standard slashing moves, followed up with 2 thrusts. The way Monson saw it, it was pretty good, but he still could not seem to make his strikes fast enough, no matter how hard he tried. Reading through his notes made him laugh. He thought about how flustered he had become over the weeks of explanation and drilling when he first started fencing, not so long ago. There was so much to know and so many things to learn. It was all a bit overwhelming. Taking pity on him, Artorius explained that no matter what the technique or style, he would be able to break it down if he understood one very important thing. There were still only 9 real strike zones on the body. That's it. Only 9. If one understood this, they also understood that regardless of the move, whether it be thrust, cleave, or slash, the opponent still had to attack one of those areas. To break down an attack and therefore counter it was to understand what area was being attacked and with what move. Monson reveled in that information, which made breaking down moves surprisingly easy. He could do this. He could learn. And he was starting to, if not slowly. He set the journal down and walked a ways off from the picnic table. He pulled out his phone, plugged his earbuds into it, and scrolled through song titles, most of which he did not recognize. Casey had placed a lot of music on his phone, mainly because Monson did not own any or really have much of a preference. He settled on an instrumental piece called Equilibrium and started into some stretching. The prancing patter of hair-prickling piano drew him in as he stepped to some very basic movements. As the tempo deepened, his swaying motions and wandering mind followed. He allowed it to do so and felt his heart lighten ever so slightly as he cracked the eggshell of his own self-discovery. It was time to ponder and reflect, and out here, alone, surrounded by the fresh air and piney-smelling woods, he finally felt able to do so. The smooth bow movements of a violin made its presence known, joining the piano in harmony as he closed his eyes and breathed deeply. The fusion of piano keystrokes and violin strings molded its beauty into his weary and defeated core, intensifying the already growing peaceful feeling. He pushed his concentration further into the complicated construct of chords and scales, falling into the rhythm of the piece as the notes climbed and fell in symphonic unity. As he delved deeper into the music, he saw that there was almost a story in and of itself, streaming through the lines of interplaying melodies. It was as if the instruments were struggling for supremacy, albeit subtly, and seemed to always remain perfectly within the borders of their own imperfect world. They fought back and forth, each line of music careening as their pace and emphasis broadened. Each became bolder and fiercer, taking their sounds to greater and loftier heights, all while striving to overcome and conquer their counterpart. One, then the other, louder and strong. He stopped dead in his tracks, letting the unfinished form of the jaw-nose center step stutter and fall. That was it. He was like the music. Two pieces of his inner self were fighting for dominance. Neither could truly gain absolute control, as to do so would have some horrible and unfortunate effect. Like him, if the piano were... Another change in the flow of music catalyzed a detour in his thought process. A new instrument stormed the melodic battlefield, interjecting itself into the introspective sonata. It felt like an invader, someone or something that was not supposed to be there. He cleared his mind. Where were these thoughts coming from? Could there really be an instrument in a musical piece that was not supposed to be there?
No, music by design is supposed to mesh, is supposed to come together. So how could he think that there was some sort of battle within the course of the instruments? Then again, did it matter? He was on the path to understanding. He could feel it. So why not run with it? He closed his eyes again, sinking his mind into the music, hoping to find out more.
What could the music tell him? What was he going to do? At once, he opened his eyes, saving himself the trouble of answering his own question. Monson stared into the face of his own unscarred countenance. Strangely enough, he was not the least bit surprised to see the figure standing before him. It was as if he had always known that this is where he would end up, alone, facing himself. Facing himself? He sounded like a stupid self-help book. He steadied his trembling hand as he asked the question that was burning a hole at the fringes of his proverbial being. Did you attack the diamond? Monson's corporeal mirror stared right through him, giving no response or indication that he, or it, or whatever the heck it was even listening. Monson gazed inquisitively. Why aren't you answering me? You were all ready and itching to talk to me before. The tangible echo again said nothing, but did close its eyes. Monson scanned the face of his replica, who stood perfectly still, giving off an almost neutralizing aura. A dramatic shift in the air around his clone forced Monson to shrink back. The pulse of an overwhelming bloodlust strengthened inside, steadily thickening like the drum of an overeager heartbeat. Monson blinked as all the mundane sounds around him died, leaving only the throb of a deadly song. When he opened his eyes, his lifelike twin stood inches from him and stared at him with eyes that were not his own. Bright glowing silver replaced the dull blue-gray that once occupied the space. Monson and his other self stared at one another, transfixed. While no words passed between them, Monson could feel the carnage and destruction radiating from the figure that stood before him. Monson suddenly realized that he was staring into the face of evil. His evil. Acting like a trigger, the moment he thought this, the replica started to fade away, dissipating right before Monson's eyes. "No!" Monson shrieked. "Not yet! Answer me! Who are you?" At any other time, Monson would have been completely embarrassed by the crack of his tone and the fear in his voice. But not today. Not now. He needed to have those questions answered, and he didn't care how. The ethereal form smiled as it melted into thin air, but surprised Monson when he opened his mouth to speak. The crackle of a cold voice came not from those parted lips, but from the airy nothingness surrounding them.
I am the least of your problems, little one.
Malicious laughter echoed and mixed with a parting admonition.
You really should be more aware of your surroundings.
More aware of my what? The answer to that question came in a vision of a figure, seen through the fading traces of his imitation's indistinct form. Monson's blood ran cold, almost coming to a complete stop as he stared at the mirage-like figure, not far past the fading vapor. He collapsed to one knee as the familiar feelings of fear, surprise, and confusion slammed into his mind, and the horror of his dreams suddenly became reality. Monson's eyes locked on a man, clothed in a billowing black cloak. Pulsing anger set his soul and mounting bloodlust aflame. A superimposed vision of a cloaked man spilling the lifeblood of a young girl burst to the forefront of his confused and alien thoughts. The mental video faded into a cruel, cold visage of another standing over a frame of a battered, defeated individual, attacked in his weakest of moments. His thoughts sparked something inside him. This newfound glimmer fused with the now familiar, but ever-foreign inner darkness. The evil emotion solidified into crystal-clear motivation. His sandy foundation of surprise shored itself into granite-like confidence as Monson came to a clear, all-encompassing realization. He was no longer afraid.
He found himself on his feet, gripping his bokken as if he were a gladiator in a Roman arena.
His mind grew lucid, honed and focused, as the foreign and dangerous emotion that he had been so scared of in the past surged and took him over completely. He pointed the mock blade at the man in the black cloak. I don't know if you really exist, or if you're only in my mind. The figure did not answer. But I do know this. I am tired of being afraid. So, come to me, man in black. Whether you be demonic apparition or part of my sinister psyche, come. Let us see if you are real or make-believe. Monson took an en-garde stance and felt his own rage stream from his hand and course down the blade. He hardly noticed the splinter of cracking wood. A cruel smile gleamed from the shadows of the hood and seemed detached from the almost completely concealed face. Unexpectedly, a voice spoke from beyond the shrouded man.
It seems the son of the great betrayer has some fight left in him.
Son? What do you mean, son? Monson's mind whirled. However, his all-engulfing anger would not allow for a sidebar discourse. He charged. Monson shot forward like a deranged cheetah, directing everything in his being on that one moment of contact. He closed the distance, faintly noting the subtle boom of thunder somewhere in the distance. From what seemed like 100 feet away, a thought came sharply into his head, thrusting aggressively through the haze of boiling rage. The grinning man isn't moving, he thought. Monson was 50 feet away now, but still nothing. No reaction from the cloaked man. 25 feet came and went, yet no movement. 20 feet. 15 feet. 10. 5. Monson's blade came across the cloaked man's chest, the latter gaping in surprise, as the wood seemed to take on a blade-like edge.
The dark cloth rent as the bokken sailed through it like the sharpest of swords.
Monson followed through, splitting the man from shoulder to hip, and completed the slash hunched down and to one side, and held the pose. He could hear nothing. The only sound was the rise and fall of his own breathing. He could feel nothing, only the drive of his unnatural bloodlust. He did his best to control the swelling impulse as realization settled in. He did not know what he had expected. Agonizing screams, the splutter of life fluids, or the disillusion of a foregone delusion, perhaps. But the crumbling of stacked stones to the earth and the tearing of black, lifeless cloth were the last things he could have or would have foreseen. He did not let his guard down, or better said, he could not let his guard down. Something was lingering, mixed among the lush breath of vegetation and thick, watered air. He could feel it. He could feel someone. The loitering traces of another's presence saturated his surroundings. He heard faint, diabolical laughter that seemed to ping off every subjugated movement of air, taunting him like a mythical spirit or ghost. Inexorably, that ping-like sound or feeling drew him away from the pile of stones, appealing to him at the most basic, instinctual of levels. Monson sprang back into action, racing towards the barracks and rounding the corner of its western edge. A full gust of wind blasted him, forcing him to close his eyes as he cleared the angle of the building. The tail ends of laughter fell prey to the strengthening waves of air. Then all at once, all natural sounds cut out, as if the power cord to nature's sound system severed at the moment of rhythmic climax. Then, there was silence. Annoyingly natural, unadulterated silence. Monson swore aloud. "Where are you? I know you're here!" No one answered him. All at once pain descended upon his person. At the same time, he heard the scuffling of feet just behind him. His skin ignited as the same thin layer of fire he had experienced in all its painful glory during Artorius' tryout rippled across his body. Monson did his best not to submit, not allowing the fire to overcome him. "No, not yet. There are still things to do, starting with—"
He spun around, swinging his bokken like a medieval claymore.
He did not readily recognize the newcomer, but was amazed as they dodged the blow that brimmed with killing intent. Monson's sword sailed through thin air, and was only stopped as it came crashing into the unmovable brick of the barracks. The scorching pain was fully upon him now, so much so that he barely registered the splintering remnants of his wooden sword. As the final wisps of his sanguine thirst burned away, and the physical, mental, and emotional demands of the last few minutes laid hold upon him, he fell toward the ground, finally overtaken. It was only then that he noticed the glitter of icy, sapphire eyes.